Well, hello, and great to be back on the MillVet podcast. The MillVet is out there helping our veterans transition into private equity and venture capital backed roles. But we also are out there to talk and share the stories of veterans that are transitioning and or have transitioned and just tell their stories. And today I have the pleasure to sit down with Vince Varga, a very interesting guy that has done, I mean, maybe the most wide variety of things anyone could ever do in some ways. So excited to have you here. Great. It was great to meet you back in Dallas a few weeks ago and said I knew I had to have you on the podcast because, man, your story is a unique one. But welcome, first and foremost, Vince. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, when we met, I felt like I was a fish out of water, surrounded by a lot of financial experts.
I feel the same way. I'm new in this space as well. You know, I said I was 25 years Marine Corps, and I spent 7 years recruiting at Amazon. In this space, on the MillVet side, is a little new to me, but jumping right in and again, having fun talking to folks. Again, we do like to tell on the MillVet side stories of everybody out there because everybody's transition was different. Everybody's path has been different. The thing that unites us is our time in the service and how you got there and what you did after that is what we'll talk about today. So I'd love to kick it off. Just kind of the first question of, just talk about what got you initially to join the military and kind of what was your background? Do you have a military family or what was your impetus to join it up back in the day?
We weren't like this military focused family. My father was a Marine. He did his
shout out for Marine Corps.
He did his initial enlistment and then got out. But he really didn't talk about it much. And, it wasn't kind of this, we weren't raised to be overly patriotic. We just, my dad was very, very Marine in that sense where it never leaves the Marine, right? But I didn't really think about patriotism or anything. I liked war movies, but that's it. And really the only reason I joined was I lost a full ride scholarship in baseball. And I was kind of stuck in a moment of, well, what do I do next? After 9/11, that really, I thought about joining immediately. I was like, man, this looks like I need to go serve. But I was playing college baseball and, I was still trying to live out that dream of hopefully chasing, to play professionally. When I lost that opportunity in the sense of I lost a full ride scholarship in college, there was no way forward in baseball after that. I kind of knew I had to choose something, and I was watching the war on TV and felt like that might be the next answer for me. And so I went to the recruiting and station and asked for the hardest thing I could find. And, lo and behold, they gave me a contract for Ranger. So I became a United States Army Ranger.
That is awesome. That is awesome. But it's great. We had a couple of guests on that have talked about the impact, obviously, of 9/11 and whether they had family or not family in the military. That certainly was a galvanizing moment for so many of us of our age, and to feel that just desire to give back in some way, shape, or form. And great and good on you for taking that next step. And that's obviously quite a transition from playing baseball in college to getting over to going to be a Ranger. What was that like? What was that cultural shift like going from college experience to Army experience?
Yeah, I was good at drinking because of college baseball, so that worked. That transition worked really well. It's a team effort. The same effort you took in college sports is the same effort you took in special operations military, and I kind of used my little bit of leadership that I learned from the baseball to the military, and it helped me become successful. Baseball, quite frankly, teaches you how to build resiliency because it's nothing but a game of failure, right? You lose more than you win. And I've built a lot of my resiliency in life, I believe, on just so many years of playing baseball that it genuinely helped me become a better soldier. And so I was good at losing. I was good at, bouncing back. I was good at, resiliency and dusting off and getting back in the batter's box and taking another swing. And so I used that same mentality in the military, and it helped me become a little more successful than I thought, So I ended up finding a home in the military, as in I was just as good at something outside of baseball that I never thought.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I say that all the time. You learn more from failure than you do success. If you're always successful, it's easy, right? But when you fail and you learn from the failure and come back from it, I mean, failing is okay, if you take it and learn from it and grow from it and become better. And certainly baseball. And look, I was a walk-on football player in college, so I get it. I certainly missed that. I only did it for a couple of years, and same. I got out of the football side, and I was an All-American in the fraternity house, and I was really good. But I missed that team, and joined the Marine Corps. The one thing I will say, I thought I was joining a football team in the Marine Corps, and I realized I was joining a running club. You're a big guy like me, it's like, man, this is a little more running than I used to do it in the football team, and probably in baseball, but you overcome and adapt, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, talk a little bit of your time in the military. What was some highlights for you, and how long did you serve, and kind of some highlights of your time in the Army?
So in total, I served 18 years, and 6 of those were active. 4 were active duty during my first enlistment, and then I got activated as a reservist a few times. Well, it was one time plus a small little stint. And so, my active duty time taught me a lot about myself. I did 3 tours. I did 2 Afghanistan tours and 1 Iraq tour. And, you learn a lot. Being an Army Ranger, the mission tempo is fast and furious. And our job is to, kill or capture high-value targets in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, and the other side is gathering as much intel so we can have follow-on missions. And we were good at it. And we did a good job. And I was very proud of that. But, in that same op tempo, we lost a couple individuals during my time. And that weighed heavy on me, just trying to understand it as a young man growing up from 23, 24, 25, 26, trying to understand life, trying to understand what the future looks like. And my purpose, I felt I might be better suited getting out of the military and trying to pursue something outside of that. While overseas, I remember we captured an individual that had connections to the United States, and his partners were in the United States planning another attack, some kind of, terrorist attack on America. And when we were able to gather that intel, get to the FBI, and eventually they were able to kind of follow on that mission, it made me think like how important it is to protect our own country. And so when I got out of the active duty service, I felt it was important to try and do something like the Border Patrol, which I did. I applied for the Border Patrol to hopefully protect our country on our own soil. And which felt just as much of importance as doing what we did overseas. And so, I went that direction. And on the reserve side of things, I went to become a drill sergeant, which is super rewarding. It's the most rewarding career I've ever had, is raising young men and women to be good soldiers and teaching them everything I can teach them so they can hopefully stay alive and have a fruitful career. And then I did some time in psychological operations, which is, another very important mission that, most people probably don't know all the fine details of that career field, but it's helping to, I don't even know how to explain it. It's a good career.
It's interesting. It's different. It's very unique, for sure. Yeah. That's awesome. And it's funny you mentioned, the idea of going back home to serve. Because people would always ask. I did 8 deployments. I did 3 Iraqs, 3 Afghanistan, Somalia, Bosnia. And people are like, well, isn't that horrible? I'm like, no, that was where I was supposed to be. Wouldn't you be rather fighting an away game than a home game? Like that's the goal, man. And being back on base was horrible. I hated being at Camp Lejeune or wherever I'm like that's the worst, man. I want to be out there doing it. But I like the idea of being able to pivot, from the military. Rangers lead the way, and you were doing that obviously for quite some time. But probably it's almost. Again, it had to be. Oh, I guess I'd be curious your take on what the difference is between military life, and you were obviously still in the reserves, but the border patrol. Is it's probably similar but different?
Right.
I don't know a lot of. I honestly, to be candid, don't know a lot about the border patrol. You know about it, and you hear about it in the news, being down on the southern border. But like, what were the difference between that? Why'd you pick the border patrol? I guess vice the FBI or whoever, and what was that like?
Well, I didn't, I would have chose the FBI if I had a bachelor's degree, to be honest.
Fair enough.
I eventually got my bachelor's, but, the Border Patrol has a special operations unit called BORTAC and BORSTAR. And those 2 units are very similar to high level of training, a very challenging selection, and their op tempo is pretty equal to like what we do overseas in the sense of they're always running missions. BORTAC specifically is like the SWAT version of law enforcement, but on the border with a bigger capacity because, the border is kind of very, very different, very diverse kind of skill set you have to have. And BORSTAR is like the civilian version of a pararescue jumper. And so I saw those teams, and they are the special operations of the Border Patrol, and I thought, you know what, that's the direction I want to go. Is it different? Yeah, it's different because like most of the guys I worked with are civilians. They've never been to combat. They've never, served in a capacity like I did in the military. And those who were in the military, we kind of have a different mindset. We were going to war. We were excited about war. We joined during a war. And in the civilian side, I think sometimes the thought process was a little lacking of that sense of urgency and the potential threats that are out there. But the great thing about the Border Patrol, it breeds individuals who are patriotic. They want to protect and serve their country, which is a really cool thing to watch. So there's pros and cons about it. I think, a civilian law enforcement, it should be civilian law enforcement, as in you don't have to have a military mindset to do that job. It's actually very complex, and you shouldn't have the military mindset. But when you're in a special operations setting, that military mindset proves to be very successful in adverse conditions. And so I think our military members on those teams, were well suited for it. And I think those civilians that joined those teams were ready to get trained in how to be good at that job as well.
Yeah, I have to believe that, especially in a unit that is like the SOF of Border Patrol, that those military skills came in from just the planning process and just the way you think about things. And QR. You actually, I'm sure it was a natural fit for you, where someone that didn't have that training would be a harder leap up. And my assumption is most of the folks on that Spec Ops version were military or had a military background. Maybe not, but I would guess it's probably where folks would gravitate towards.
It wasn't as much as you thought.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
what surprised me. It wasn't as much as you thought. A lot of guys who got out of the military, went to the Border Patrol, were kind of done running ops, right? They just
Mhm.
they just want to serve their time, it's, and you got to pass selection again, which is just as challenging as RIP or RASP, and so, but like I said, it's a group of individuals who are ready to serve the country in a different capacity, and it made it feel very close to the military. It was never, you can never compete, right? You can't
Yeah,
compete with
yeah,
war, right?
yeah.
But there was still the sense of brotherhood that like I love and respect, and so super proud of it.
No, that's awesome. I think you're right, man. Especially, I talk about that a lot, and to anyone that was in the military, it's always going to be something that you can't fill that void exactly, right?
Yeah.
You can find pieces and parts of it, but especially when you have the ability to train up for a mission, to execute the mission in real world, to be overseas for 3 months, 6 months, a year, sleeping with people, being out there in the same dirt, the dark humor that is out there,
Yes.
probably in the Border Patrol too. But it's such a unique thing. You can't recreate that, I think, anywhere else. I mean,
Yeah.
it is special, right?
What's special about it is that you are asked to protect people at the most precious commodity, and that's human life. And that threshold, there's nothing greater than that. There's nothing more serious than that job. And that's why things like law enforcement, it reaches that, it touches that. But the military, we did it day in and day out, and that is a very special thing that I've always said, I have military buddies that I feel are closer to me than my own blood brother, and it's because we've faced things that was challenging. And
Yeah.
there's something that, it's trauma bonding.
Yeah, no doubt about it. There we definitely have that trauma bond. Again, that's what's hard to that's that gap that's hard to fill, right? Again, I think you can find pieces of it, with the Border Patrol, or pieces of it, in supporting military support organizations, but it's never quite the same level of just, I don't know, just something about just that level of, I call it anxiety, but just like this, that the being in combat, there's something that bonds you together, and unfortunately, because you lose some people, and there's something about that too, where you have those bonds and memories that are just can't be compared to with anything else. But yeah, good stuff, and certainly great to serve in another, just serving in a different way. That's all.
Yeah.
It's serving in another way. And I think but you were still in the reserves doing the Border Patrol as well, right? So
Yeah.
how long did you overlap with both those things?
I ended up leaving the Border Patrol after 7 years, and I just recently, I retired in 2022 at the 18-year mark. It was 2022, 2021 at the 18-year mark, only because it was just hard to fulfill that in my personal life. And,
Yeah.
I had enough medical injuries that I could medically retire and just walk away.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I got activated at one point while I was a border patrol agent to go push troops at Fort Sill as a drill sergeant, in support of, the GWAT, and so we did that, and that was fun. It was great, but I was ready to get back to the civilian life. And when you get activated as a civilian employee and you get activated, it feels like you run the risk of losing that job, even though you don't, right? It just feels like you're just doing a disservice to them. And so once, it was always in the back of my mind during activation. And once I got done with that, it's like I went back, and now you had to kind of rebuild your career again. And you had to kind of, and so it's not easy being a reserve soldier and getting activated in between and having a career. I feel, as much as it shouldn't, I feel like it gives the employer a bad taste in their mouth that, you're not dependable at times because you might get activated or whatever the case. Even as a, fast forward a little bit, when I became an actor, I had to tell them, like, listen, if something pops off, you might lose me as a character. You might have to find a way to kill me off if I get activated, because the truth is, I was still serving the whole time I was acting as well.
Yeah, and we'll pivot to there, but it is I think that's a great point, that the guard life, the reserve life is different, right? I mean, trying to have you live in two lives, right? You're living that military life, which is all in, but you do feel like I think especially, and maybe not especially, but I do somehow think for a veteran, you're leaving that team behind, right? You feel like maybe you're not doing your part, and they're gonna, I think, forget about you. But like, you're pulled in both directions, right? You're not doing the military fully, you're not doing that fully, and there's some kind of missing piece there. I would assume that you're not doing anything 100%. You're doing a couple things that are 80%, or something like not quite there. I know it's gotta be tough. It's gotta be tough. All right, so let's move forward a little bit. How did you get into acting? I mean, seriously, obviously, from military experience, border patrol experience, which are pretty similar, acting is quite a leap. So what was the path to get there? How'd that all happen?
It's, a funny story is it was a YouTube series that, one of my buddies started, and that I grew up in LA. So acting was always on the back of my mind. I had friends who were actors. I had friends whose family involved in the Hollywood scene. I did theater in college for 2 years. And, but I never really pursued it until fast forward, 2013, I'm doing YouTube clips with some friends. They're getting very popular. And then we decided to produce our own movie. So we crowdfunded a movie. It's kind of a military cult classic. It's called Range 15. And, that was the first like acting experience I had. And I right away was like, I want to keep doing this. Like, how do I keep going? And so, I wrote a little short film, and I did some improv comedy, and, that's an independent film. It wasn't anything. It was a cult thing, the following that we had in our social media really kind of blew that up a lot bigger, but it wouldn't be considered like serious acting. You know what I mean? It was a bunch of friends made a movie and promoted it through social media. But I was in LA at the right time, at the right place, really. And I had the right look. And there was a show called Mayans MC, which is a spinoff of Sons of Anarchy. And they're a motorcycle club, and they're a Latino motorcycle club. And I was out there doing improv comedy, and I got a call saying, hey, they're still doing auditions. And I said, well, I'm interested. I sent my headshots. I sent my acting reel, and, and I sent a bio. And the funny thing is, the casting director loved the background of the Border Patrol. She thought that was interesting. And she goes, oh, that's such an interesting career. And I love his look. Can he act? And so they saw my reel, and they said, well, we'd love to have him audition. And there you go, man. And so I showed up and auditioned. And the way acting goes is you can audition multiple times. So I auditioned one time with her. She filmed it, sent it to the producers. The producers were interested in seeing me in person. So I came back. I flew in to do it again. And now I did it with the two creators of the show. And I did two different characters, a comedy character and a serious character. And, when the end of the comedy one was the second part. And when I finished that, everyone was laughing. And I was like, well, I hope I did enough, And by the time I got to the airport to fly back home to my family, which was in El Paso, Texas, the last place I was a Border Patrol agent, right? They told me, I got hired on as a character of the Mayans, and that started a 6-year journey that I'll never forget.
That is amazing. That is it is so funny how just right time, right place, not necessarily looking for it, but how it all comes together. I mean, do you feel like your military experience like helped you be successful in that? And so, like, what was the connecting file from the military to being a successful actor, if there is one?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things, to be honest. I mean, the same attitude of showing up early, being like just being punctual, right? Neatness of dress, care of equipment, all these Ranger Creed stuff is exactly how I try to carry myself on set. But not even that. You know, I had a meeting with a really famous actor before my audition. He goes, "You've been to war, dude." He goes, "You've been to war. Like, this is nothing. Don't even worry. Don't stress this out." And I was like, "You're right." Right. And so,
I got this. Yeah.
you know, some people get stage fright. I just sat there thinking, like, what do I got to lose? You know,
Yeah.
and I think the mentality of just going in there and just I felt prepared. You know, same thing as like I trained for it, I prepared for it, and right place, right time. I showed up and was successful at it. And so a lot of military mindset and being on set, it's a lot of military mindset, as in there is a hierarchy, right? There is someone in charge. There is kind of like this first sergeant, you know, platoon sergeant kind of vibe, you know, and you stay in your lane, you do your job, and you're good, right? And there's a mission. The mission is to accomplish, you know, filming the mission of the day, whatever the tasking is of that day. Our mission is to get it done in time, and so we had to accomplish that. And those could be 12 to 15-hour days at times. And so it wasn't like this easy cush job. Everyone had to show up trained, prepared, know their lines and do their job and do it well. And if not, you don't get a second season, right? And so it's very similar to the military. Now, there's no gunfire or anything, right? You're not getting shot at. You just might not be able to pay your bills because they kill you off too soon, you
Right,
know?
right. No, I think there's some great analogies of what made you successful in the military and how it translated over, and I do love the fact that you could be just so free because you hear stories of actors being so nervous that they're like, dude, what have I got to lose, man? I've been shot at. This is all good. I can, it's like this is easy. They're going to pay me to do this. This is great. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
This is awesome. That's awesome, and a successful 6-year run with that show, right?
Yeah, it was 5 seasons of the show, but it was 6 years of filming because we had to film the pilot twice. And you only work on one show a year because it takes about 6 months to complete a show, and then you get 6 months off. Those 6 months are treacherous. They're pretty tough. And then you kind of rehash your body. You study, you get back in it, you train again, you go right back into the fire and do it again.
What is like? I'm curious from an acting perspective. What do you do to keep your edge? You be going back to take acting lessons, or do you feel like
Yeah.
what your natural thing was good and you didn't want to mess that up, or do you want to get like
No.
overact? What do you do to hone your craft in the as an actor? Yeah.
Yeah, it's no different than staying good at shooting in PT, is being able to, look, emotions. It's not easy to mess with these emotions, right? And so you have to be able to engage every emotion. You got to be able to be believable. And so being able to work on your craft and knowing what are your triggers to allow emotion and how to bring them back into homeostasis so you don't go home and take that out on your family.
Yeah.
But a lot of things, it's really developing the character, building your character, acknowledging who that character is, and then working on it. And it's funny. It sounds to the average person doesn't understand that. Yeah, that's hard to understand. But if you're going to have to grow as an actor, you're going to have to learn how to cry in a scene. That's not easy for most of us men. That's not easy for most of us dudes who've been in special operations who are told their whole lives not to be weak and don't cry. And so I had to learn how to be human again. I had to learn the Rolodex of emotions and be able to use them when asked upon in film. And that means being very intense, very, very intentional about what is being said. It's a challenging thing. And then you got a room full of 40 people that are complete strangers that are going to watch you just tear your soul, and that's, acting is not this easy thing that sounds fun. It is an art. It is something that is worked on, and it's a profession, and so you really need to get to the level that I got to, and I was very fortunate. You really have to keep that craft sharp. You have to keep that tool sharp.
Did you leverage your to get to those emotional points, I would think that, I mean, personally, if I like would have had to tap into make myself cry or laugh, I would think of military things.
Yes.
You know, is that what you were able to like? All right,
Yeah.
I remember that time that that dumbass did this, or this horrible situation on the vice. Is that what you use to? I'm just curious. Do you have like these like little
Yeah.
compartments in your brain to kind of help you trigger an emotion or to make you feel in that mode? Is that I'm just
Yeah.
wondering
It's
how it kind of
absolutely.
works? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've done one movie where, the character was dying and, there's some sadness in there. And I used a lot of thoughts of my family, and if I was dying and what that would feel like, and then in the Mayans, my character was a veteran. So it was really easy to kind of
Mm-hmm.
use my own personal background as kind of the character's, emotional connection. And in scenes, I became a writer of that show in the last season and assisted a lot with my own character. And so some of the dialogue was what I put there for myself, and so definitely assisted in that. And the character, Gilly from Mayans, was struggling with post-traumatic stress and struggling with, his love of his motorcycle club, but also his veteran friends. And it was this big conflict for himself throughout the show. And it made it really easy to use, that emotional connection.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's great you were able to channel that in a real world way and have a character that embodied what you were, real emotions you felt, and to put that, and that's just reality. I always have a question for actors. Like, to me, one of the things that always would intimidate me is like learning all the lines. Like, I feel like you have this, like, man, that just seems like something that is like, I don't know. That's it's free. I was in plays in high school. I had like 3 lines. I was afraid of those. I was like, oh, I'm gonna mess up my 3 lines.
Yeah.
Is there a technique you use? Like, how did you? Was it intimidating to have this like, holy crap, I got to learn all this dialogue? Like, if you miss one word, do they care? Or can
Yeah.
you like kind of be close, or is it get the idea of what they're trying to say? I mean, how does that
Yeah,
work?
it's a great question. So I'll start with this. So some writers want you to keep exactly what they wrote on paper. And
Hmm.
so you have to be verbatim what's on paper. Some writers give you a little bit of wiggle room. So it really comes down to who the writer is and the director and how they feel about those lines. And so, that's understanding the culture of your show and how
Yeah.
they allow you to wiggle, if you have wiggle room or not. But for me as an actor and for everyone who was on my show, very professional people, and everybody remember, everybody memorizes their lines. You have to, right? Because if you don't, you cut into potential time hacks that we need to get certain things done. When I was talking about earlier, those missions we need to complete.
Yeah.
If you're slow on your lines or you can't get your lines, it slows down the whole day of filming. And now you're cutting into budget. And if you start messing with people's money, they're going to start realizing that you're not the professional that they hoped, and your character is going to get killed. Right? They're going to find a way to get rid of him. He's got cancer.
Have you ever seen that happen? Like somebody that got like that dude's not cutting it. Nope, he's out of there. Is that
Yes.
really happened like that? I mean,
Yes. It actually happens. Unfortunately, if you're a pain in the butt to work with on set, it's just like, you get peered out,
yeah, yeah.
and there's people that, they're difficult to work with on set. There's maybe a personal conflict, several things. And you can get killed off a show or removed from a show just because of that. And so to answer your first question, what I do is I read through my lines, I highlight all my lines. And then what happens is, so if I get a script and we're going to film for 7 days, you only have to really memorize those ones that you're doing on the day of. So you might only have 10 lines on day Monday and 10 lines on Tuesday, no lines on Wednesday, 20 lines on Thursday. So I'm going to learn all my lines as best I can. But by that Monday, I'm focusing only on Monday lines.
Yeah.
And then boom, dump them. Then go to Tuesday lines. And then if there's a really heavy, impactful scene, I'm working on that with my acting coach. I'm working on that with my counter actor, right? With the actor, I'm working with my scene partner. And I'm really trying to get into that because we both would want most successful scene. And so there's a lot of work to be done. But, that's your job. Your job is to memorize lines and put emotions behind those so that they're believable.
I never really thought about the practice beforehand with your other actors. Because again, to me, it's like we're all in our trailer. We have our thing. Like the first time we're doing this is like in this group setting. But you were able to talk with them ahead. Like, hey, how are you? And
And
just
yeah,
learn
and
off
you
each
know
other,
what?
I guess, right? Yeah.
The culture of every show is different. Like I couldn't do that on SWAT. My scene partner on SWAT was the main guy, Shamar Moore,
Yeah.
and man, he's way too big of an actor to allow me to say, "Hey, do you mind if I practice my line?"
Yeah. Have a beer and work over this.
No, no, no,
Yeah.
that didn't happen. That didn't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
So I just had to come prepared.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, congrats on all of that, and pretty cool just to see the pivot you made from the military, the border patrol, and then into acting, and talk about what you're doing now. Like what's that all led to? What's the latest and greatest, and how
Yeah.
are you staying involved these days?
You know, acting it comes when it comes and it goes when it goes. And
Yeah,
so, you know, I'm always working on. I just finished a script today that we'll be going over, and I'm always writing. But you know, outside of that, you know, I finished a master's in psychology, a master's in journalism, and you know, I've been doing a lot for men's mental health and wellness. And so, we started a nonprofit, me and my family. We help veterans and first responders with who are struggling with post traumatic stress and wellness. And so, we host men's retreats and we introduce them to a lot of different modalities of healing that they can hopefully take home with them and practice them themselves. And as well as, you know, we have our Tuesday group sessions where it's like men's kind of like group counseling, but I wouldn't label it as serious as that. It's really a group social hour that we work on keeping people accountable and helping them in some of the areas of their life that they might feel like they're falling short. And, you know, outside of that, it's, you know, I work with the Border Patrol as an actual career. I work with the Border Patrol currently right now, helping with their front facing message. You know, I guess the narrative that the media wanted to spin for so many years, you know, was kind of detrimental to the career field. And so we're trying to help improve that by teaching people the true career is of its importance. Like I said before, the protecting of its own nation on its own soil is second to none of importance. And so, you know, I'm helping construct those messaging through some of my own personal training and you know, my own experiences with film and television.
I'd like to pull the thread a little more on what you're doing on the post traumatic stress side and the group. What's the name of the organization, by the way? If anybody's in the area,
Yeah.
this is all in L.A. You're in L.A., right? Yeah.
No, no, I'm in Dallas, but
Oh,
we're
I
moving to
thought you
Salt
were
Lake.
in L.A. Okay.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
moving to Salt Lake City here soon, but it's called TMRW Battalion. So it stands for tomorrowbattalion.org.
Yeah.
And if anyone wants to support, you're more than welcome to support there. But like I said, we offer, you know, just these retreats that we host every year, and as well as this men's group. The men's group is called Light the Fuse. That's open to the public if they're interested, but it's a place where if, you know, any veterans or first responders are looking for some support, they have you know, a concurrent, you know, system that'll be there every Tuesday night for you to communicate, to talk, and then outside of that, just to connect you with any kind of resources needed. And so we're very proud of seeing how that has grown throughout the years and kind of evolved into a space where men have been able to find a lot of success in that group. And you know, that's just what we're pushing. It's not coaching. It's not these coaching groups. It's 100% about accountability and community.
I love that, and the idea of a retreat really resonates with me. I do every year. I just did it 3 weeks ago. I do a 4-day silent Jesuit-led retreat, all male, 110, 116 guys there, and it's just I so look forward to it every year to unplug from the real world and be able to focus on my spirituality, which is just part of your mental health for me. And I love that idea of doing a retreat. And it's hard to focus on yourself a lot of times in day to day life, right? I think you get caught up in the just whatever work, life, family. To be able to go somewhere else and truly unplug from hopefully your devices and computer and really focus on what's truly important is fantastic. What are the retreats like? What is your y'all's
Yeah,
retreats
so
like?
we introduce them to, like I said, as many modalities as we can fit that makes sense. And so we teach them about the Wim Hof method, cold plunge, and you know, the reasons why that's going to be healthy. We teach them non-psychedelic plant medicine. It's just kind of a ceremonial. We show them a sweat lodge, Native American sweat lodge. You know, we do some somatic breathing work. We give people the opportunity to be baptized, and in that moment, if they want to be baptized in that weekend, we have a pastor who's going to be there the whole time giving prayer. We do brain chemistry, so we actually do we test their brain function and see where it can be improved. We do their blood work and check on their hormones and see what those levels are. So really, by the time they leave, they should have a good, well-rounded understanding of some tools that they can put in their back pocket if they find themselves in crisis. And then also some understanding better of what their hormones look like, what their brain function looks like, if there's a potential for, if they have an untreated TBI or some focus management that we need to address and things like that. And so it really is about kind of giving them these answers in moments of crisis where they can turn to. If someone finds themselves in crisis, they can turn to fitness, they can turn to Wim Hof method, the cold plunge, breathing, or even just, ceremony. And so we're really just trying to give guys answers in the moments of crisis instead of, what I would like to do is I'm trying to guide men into, taking a self-assessment, getting a good understanding, like, hey, right now I'm not in a good space. Let me focus again. Let me recalibrate myself. And with any of these tools, they can do that. We even created a concept called healing through hitting, and it uses hitting a baseball. So it's a system that we created that we can get guys to go to a batting cage and actually proven data with brain function. It will help them come out of crisis by just taking, 2 rounds of hitting on a batting cage. If they have a sense of thought, of kind of like consciousness while doing it, and it could really improve their, putting them in a crisis mode to an actual just a functional mode where they can, get things done throughout the day.
I love that. I mean, I love the fact that you're giving them what I call it a menu of options to choose
Yeah.
from when they need the right tool in the tool chest for the right occasion, right? Because everybody's different and everybody has the way their brains function and their feelings function. But to give them the full tools in the tool chest instead of all I have is a hammer, I have to do it this way, or it's just everybody's different and they're gonna respond to different options, but to know that, okay, yeah, today I'm feeling I can use this technique or this thing to help me get through it. That's pretty cool. I've never heard of that approach, and I love it. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Super cool.
Thank
Good
you.
on you, Vince. I like that. I like that a lot. Very cool.
Well, it's funny. It's all rooted in my own struggle and feeling like, I didn't find what I needed at the VA. And I was out there searching and looking. And as I got myself educated, I started to realize, like, what? A lot of these organizations focus on the negative, right? They focus on the 22 or suicide.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do, just like we do in military, like, how do you reverse plan this? So if this is crisis and this is not crisis, well, how do I get back to this? And so then I realized, like, well, we should, 1, teach people how to live healthier lifestyles. So then I'm going to focus on wellness. And then 2, how do I mitigate trauma, right? And so in the drill sergeant community, we create these, was it like risk management, right? Like risk, the risk assessments. And so how do I create a risk assessment for someone who might, the worst case scenario? Well, let's back it up. Let's not let them get there. And so I make every option kind of the green option, if you will. And so teach you guys how to live healthier lifestyles and then implement any kind of mitigation efforts, which would be some of these tools to hopefully they never get to crisis.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I think there is, and you hit on it, there is this narrative out there of the broken veteran. All veterans are broken and they have PTSD and you can't hire them because they're broken. And we have to get beyond that. I mean, and I think sometimes veterans are the worst at proliferating that actual stigma.
Yeah.
And we got to get beyond it. I remember hearing General Mattis talk several years ago about, he hated the word post-traumatic stress. Like, let's focus on post-traumatic growth. Like, we've had this trauma. I'm not trying to ignore it, but use that to grow and figure out, okay, that was a point at one point in my life, but how do I take that traumatic event and grow from it and, become, whatever I can be. But that doesn't definitely define you.
Yeah.
It can be part of your journey, but there is I love that idea of growth post the trauma, because we've all had the trauma in some way, shape, or form, veteran or non-veteran. People have trauma in their lives, but how do you get beyond that point into the growth phase? And giving people the tools to do that is what you're doing. Is like, if they're stuck, I think they'll get stuck. And how do you unstick them? And I think that's really a lot of what you're doing. It's fantastic. I really like that.
Thank
Very
you.
cool. Yeah, very cool. What else, man? I know we're getting close to the end here, and this is one of I really have enjoyed talking about your veteran career, your border patrol career, your acting career, which is great, and still growing, and writing, which is obviously fantastic as well. What else do you want to share with our audience today? Anything else? Any closing thoughts?
No, I think the last part of the conversation exactly is my biggest push is trying to help veterans, get out of that mindset, right? That's my biggest thing is what I've been doing is trying to get them to reframe their thoughts of the victimization that we've accidentally put ourselves into, and realizing like there's so much out there, right? And it's how we've, in the counseling world now that, I've been in and helping with is we have to reframe a lot of this stuff. We have
Yeah.
to reframe how we see it. And what the biggest thing that helped me with that was becoming sober. And that's like a faux pas. You don't say that in the military.
Yeah. Right.
You don't say that in the
Yeah.
military.
Yeah.
But I've been sober now coming up on 6 years, and I've realized that not just the culture of baseball, but the culture of being Latino, but the culture of also special operations. I was born, bred, and raised to drink, and we use drinking far too much as the coping mechanism of our lives.
Sure.
And it is one of the biggest killers of our communities, all communities,
Yeah.
the law enforcement community, military community, men community. And if you look at the statistics, and this is something that shook me, was that 99% of the individuals who have taken their lives, were drinking. And it is that one thing that seems to be the trigger that sets people over the edge in the moments of crisis. And so if I could tell anyone here, I would say really, really look into why you even need to drink, but also when you're promoting drinking, what others might be struggling with that you might be handing them, that one thing that puts them over the edge.
Yeah.
And so at our organization, we host venues and stuff, and we never introduce drinking because we never know who's suffering. We never know who's using that as a tool, as the mechanism. And we never want to be the answer that they're looking for. And so I'd be very cautious of everyone who's listening to this is be mindful of what alcohol is doing to our own community. That, in my opinion, is the biggest crippler that we have called for so long as normal, and we have come to just say this is just who we are, and it is the number one thing that is assisting in losing our brothers and sisters daily.
Man, it really hits home with me. I grew up in New Orleans, and that's just like drinking is like that's just we do, right? I mean, when I grew up, drinking age was 18, and we even everything at 15. It's just that was part of what we did. Every family event, everything, and then going to military. I mean, fraternity, military. I mean, it's just kind of all part of that. But I've seen it too, and I've had some personal connections with folks that have not done well with it. Some that have made it out of it, but it's a struggle, and I get it. But that is a great way to close this out. Thank you, Vince, for your passion, for sharing your journey and what you're doing and giving back, man. You are doing some great things out there to help others, and I think that's what it's all about. How do we sound the elevator back down and help those folks that need the help? How do we give back and use the gifts, the God-given gifts we've been given to make a difference out there? So thank you for the time. Keep up the good work out there. I hope to see you on the big screen sometime soon and something. I have a feeling there are big things ahead. So let's make it happen. Thanks again.
Thank you.
You got
Appreciate
it.
it.
All right.